When asked to reimagine in a 3-minute presentation our role as designers and thinkers trained to understand space, we quickly reached the limitations of the architect in their current position. The built environment is shaped more strongly by policy, financial structures, and surplus land value assessments than by the pen, or more accurately, mouse, of the architect. While the architect applies their design thinking to the brief as given, no real change can be made without challenging those parameters, which can be held responsible for structural issues in relation to environmental and social justice. Architects trained in spatial thinking remain excluded from spaces which determine these structures. There is a tendency in the discipline to view a project as a hermetic object, isolated in its own gravity and timeline, devoured singularly by private capital. It is only in hindsight, when rising rent pushes marginalized communities further to the margins and climate change threatens to displace millions, that we understand the aggregate contribution the discipline has made, complicit in the pathology of the very spaces we sought to revolutionize. If architects have any ambition of making a difference, they cannot do so at the end of the process. The architect must insert themselves as a political actor earlier in the timeline. Rather than continuing to wrap optimized plans in ever more performative facades, architects must push up against the structures which are determining the ideal FAR. We have graduated with training in spatial thinking and design-based problem solving, but are presented a collapsing job market asking for Revit experience. And so we must look elsewhere, for spaces which could benefit from architects, and their ability to reimagine and restructure systems which no longer perform. The architect reclaiming agency is central to projects which seek to disrupt the exploitative growth model of contemporary cities and profit motives of the market. Jack Self writes, quote, "I'm profoundly skeptical of anyone with such limited vision as to think grassroots, community, or crowdsourced design could be agents for meaningful social change in the face of such a venerable, hyper-stable opponent. Architecture must simply exploit or redeploy pre-existing financial conditions for social ends. The only indisputable requirement, of course, is that this architecture, which is capable of restructuring power relations, must be financially profitable." End quote. This is an architect who refutes their position at the end of the process, and instead forces their relevance in restructuring the processes which typically precede the architect's commission. Similarly, efforts to rethink the very structures of our discipline itself, our own pedagogies, institutions, precedents, codes, canons, and conventions, can act as agents in the restructuring of the systems that precede architectural commission. Which spaces would benefit from having an architect at the table? What makes an architect different from a politician, a developer, or a bank? Who does the architect serve? How do we reform the current model of practice as a labor service profession that responds primarily to private capital? Confronting these challenges will require engagement with efforts to dismantle the material and ideological systems driving today's social-economic disparities.